A little while ago I put a couple of pictures of this being made up on Instagram, and a lot of people asked if I'd do a video on how to do it. I've resisted it because, as you'll see shortly, the tools are really rudimentary. I'm by no means a master on this. I would suggest really I'm sort of right at a beginner's level on this sort of thing. It's not difficult to produce something nice quite quickly. So I'll show you the tools I've used. If you want to see some amazing examples of this, I would suggest Hugo Serrano, if I've pronounced his name right, and Douglas Pryor. If you can find them on Instagram and other places, you'll see what I mean. There's some fantastic examples of this workmanship taken to the top of the level on their social media. But on this sort of thing where it's almost 2D, just a nice simple little decoration common to the sort of mid to late 14th century. You see this thing before it becomes more complicated. The technique to do it is very straightforward and very simple. Whether it's what they did, I don't have a clue, but it works well for me and gets the results that I think I can see on the effigies. So we'll take a look at how to put this into this space. I probably won't show the whole process, or I'll speed it up or whatever, because it gets quite dull once you've cracked the basics of it. But we'll see where we get to, and I'll put that on there. So first things first, you'll need to be able to draw whatever it is on a piece of paper. Make your mistakes on here, costs a lot less and takes a lot less time. So whatever your thing is, draw it first on some paper. Use a reasonably good graphite pencil, because you'll be using this as a piece of tracing paper of a sort in a while. The brass I'm using in this case is what's called shim. Give me 1 second. It comes in little packs like this, and this is 0.127 millimeters thick in that direction, or for our American cousins that is 0.005 of an inch. It's very thin. The first thing people say is, well, that won't take any damage if it gets hit while you're fighting. It's very true. We will be backfilling this to give it a bit of resistance, but it's decoration, not armour, so don't worry about that. It'll withstand stuff. It'll get dented, but no more or less than anything else will. So draw your pattern, and when you've got that ready, I take a look at the brass. So the first stage then, get your pattern traced or drawn onto here. Now there's all manner of techniques for doing this. I'm just going to trace this down and then follow the pencil line that I've done. Some brasses, I've just discovered, having done this full technique on this one, don't take lead pencil very well. This one, however, I discovered just a moment ago, takes it like a marker pen. So I needn't have bothered with all of this, but I'm going to show it anyway, because particularly with steels, but with other brasses, they just won't show up on the surface. So what you do is you take some plasticine and you rub it across the surface, and that will enable you to see the graphite a bit better. Any old bit of plasticine will do. 1 second. There's the blob I used, which I think I pinched from my wife. She uses it to make her flowers, and you just rub the surface. Go a bit mad with it, try not to be too uniform, because sometimes the lead can struggle if it's running in the same grain. And then all you've got to do is stick that to that. What I've done, this is the way around I want it. And what I've done is I've drawn around it on that side so that I can use that as my tracing. I haven't gone like you do when you do tracing as a kid like this, because I've found it doesn't work very well. You actually go around where you need to be. So just stick that down on there. Make sure you've got a nice edge on all points, because if you get close to the edge with the pattern it can start to deform. And stick that down. So I've fixed all this down just with packing tape. Any tape will do, really. The more savage the tape, the less chance there is you'll be able to peel it off of your pattern without wrecking it. So just be on the lookout for that. Now, I tried using a compass with this, and what tends to happen is it just skates around and your circles end up everywhere. So just trust to your eye and get that down there. And to be fair, it often gives it a good sort of medieval look anyway, if it does go a little bit awry, not really badly, but just a touch. So all you do now is trace that down firmly onto there. You'll notice as well that I've taped all the way around the edge, not just a couple of bits of the end, because I don't want it ruffling up any more than it's going to do anyway. So just trace round and then we'll get that removed. It's worth stating throughout this process that you really can't rush it. If you are into rushing work and getting fast results, I would suggest this isn't the hobby or the pastime or the style of decoration for you. It really can't be rushed, unfortunately. But hopefully, through the power of modern video editing, we can rush a bit. So it takes about 10 minutes or so to put something down like that onto the brass. And you can see there, you can't really see very much, but if I catch it in the light, there you go. You can see how I've got an impression, a working impression there to go. And all I do is I go over that again with the pencil, just in case there are some bits that haven't come through. I don't want to make a mistake, and then get something like a Sharpie, because you'll need that after we've annealed it. But I'll go around again now and just pencil it in so I can see it. I've had a quick change of venue to the kitchen because my wife's in the workshop making all sorts of noise. But there we go. So there's the pencil down onto the brass. Now we're going to anneal the brass in it. You do need to anneal it really for this to work. Obviously I've got a setup in the workshop, but one of those little cheap cam blow lamps will do it. You don't want stacks of heat on these, so a couple of £1 at your local DIY store to get one of those little things that the plumbers use. You can often find them, just to get the metal a sort of cherry red colour. So it's all annealed now and ready for the next stage. Just go around it in a Sharpie. I didn't do the Sharpie before because the Sharpie doesn't tend to withstand the annealing very well. You tend to lose the mark. So you just make your way around again now, drawing it back on. Carefully with a Sharpie. Best use a sharp one, or a new one rather than something that's a bit blunt. And just make your way around, drawing in the lines again. To it. Let me just check it's still lined up because I've moved everything. Just about, there we go. Alright. So make sure you're on the leather. Your hands in a comfortable position. You can see your pattern. And just press gently So hopefully you've seen some of the sped up stuff there, and I thought what I'll do is I'll just concentrate on this last petal and then the tidying down. So what you're watching me do sped up is just touching my line first, and what this does, it causes a slight impression. Don't push hard. It just gives a slight impression on the surface, which as you run up to it, you can feel the bump. If you go off a little bit, don't worry, just readjust, it'll all settle out. Now don't go pushing too hard, otherwise you will mark a line into the work that you might not be able to get rid of. You just come around there, and obviously the pattern I'm doing here might not be the pattern you're doing. Anything can do it. Initials, letters, names, whatever. What that gives you, when you come on the surface here and you have a look, you can just see, move it around to the light and catch it. And then go up to it and you can feel it with the biro tip when you get to it. Just go steady, again with a similar amount of pressure. If you go pushing hard, look, what will happen, let's find a piece. If you go pushing hard, you get a line like that, which can be difficult to lift out. Depends on what sort of work you're doing. If you're just doing a square, you can give it a bit of pressure. But if you're doing something complicated, there you go, you can see that nice and clear. You then got to fill that in. Just use the pen for the moment. You get nice easy lines to go up, see? But what you end up with is this box frame of an impression left, which depends on what you want really. If that's what you're after, then it's perfect. But if you don't want it and you want a smooth graduation into the relief, it can pose a bit of a problem. You have to go over it and over it and over it. So if you don't push too hard, you're generally okay. It just takes a little bit longer, but you'd have to clean up less. So I make my way along. Like I say, I resisted doing this when I started, was asked to, because the tools for this simple version are embarrassingly straightforward. And pretty much you could do the whole thing with a Bic if you wanted. Other biros are available. So I've gone round, and what that does, gives me something a bit more definite, and it's starting to pull the piece up from there. I don't like to risk doing the whole surface in this because you can leave lines everywhere if you push a bit hard or whatever. So get it squared down on the leather underneath and go over the piece with the end of the Bic. That way you don't need a specialist tool. You can use something like this, but again, if you miss, you can scour a mark into it. You can go like that. I think I've just put a mark in it actually by accident, but we'll see. And just gentle pressure, get that brass moving. When you get up to the edges here, if you're using a tool like this, be careful not to jump over by accident, because you're going to do a bit in a minute that starts to lift it. Don't try and lift it straight from the back here, at least that's what I found. When you start to get into more complicated projects, and rather than a bit of old leather, you've got some bitumen or something like that, and there's some pitch, and it all works well. And I've forgotten which one I'm on, which happens regularly. This one. There we go. So I tend to prefer the end of the pen. So there we go. We've given that a push down. Flip it over, take your pen again and use the point. You can use something like that. Just looking around the table for what we've got in there. Sharpie, anything that's got a bit of movement in it. You can use a pencil, just blunt it first. Really blunt it, and you can use a pencil. I think folk were doing stuff like this right back in antiquity, and they didn't have complicated tools. So don't overcomplicate it for yourself. if you want to get a look that's akin to something from a period. Just use a few tools that they would have had available, and you can almost guarantee, as eggs as eggs, you will end up with something that looks like it could have come from the period. If you go using lots of specialist tools these days, you'll get something that generally looks like it was made today. Right, so there we go. I just want to give that. Now I've got a push back in there. What I can do is I can revisit it with my pen, and I can just give it a bit more of a curve. Gently, don't push hard. Remember what we're saying about those lines. Work it round. Pushing into it. You'll feel it go. This is what I was saying before, don't worry too much about what state your lines are in, because you'll see the smoothness of it, and you'll have it right, you'll have it wrong. Just adjust as necessary. But the less mistakes there are, the less you have to tidy up. Around here. Again, I always find pushing into the work rather than pulling into it tends to get me a better result, I've found. On the edge here, just on this one, what I've done is I've not tried to put a lining till I've got to it. It's sort of, if you go gently, the metal will only take so much pressure. Ooh, he says. Tidy that up. And then just dress it around. Yeah, your biro or your wood tool, whatever. Press all of this down. In the middle as well, otherwise you'll end up with a strange raised bit. Takes a bit of time, but it's not exhausting. You can have the radio on. Whatever you want. Flip it over, make sure you're on the right one again. Now these edges, quite straightforward, just roll my knife in. And again, if you wanted to get really crisp edges, you'd have this mounted in some pitch now. But I don't need them for this work. So just walk it in, they're sharp enough, just like this. And the same across the back here, there's a biro for that. Work my way around, smoothing it all down. Right, and there is how to do a basic bit of repousse. So hopefully the sped up bit will show you the basics of it, and that little tutorial at the end will do that. All this ink will come off, because you'll probably have to re-anneal it at some point. Get rid of some of the mistakes, especially when you start going around here, because this has all started to stiffen up so as you go around, but you anneal as necessary. The ink will just burn off. Obviously if you go putting that on armour as is, and a sword blade comes straight across there, it's just going to cut a line straight through it, and that will break. It will dent in no time. So what I tend to do is backfill it with solder, normal solder, soft solder, or clean it back, or even pitch. Make sure you get a decent pitch recipe because you don't want it leaking out on a hot day. But that's all there is to it. It's really straightforward, and you can make nice patterns.